Can you speak to the concept of working all over the place at once versus working section by section, area by area, for some object by object? Does this change from the establishment of the start, covering a large area, to higher levels of finish, spending more time with specifics? Is this based on practical wet into wet and visual hierarchy of importance concerns? Now, he's asking that question considerably more complexly than someone else does. That's Dan. The second question is, you've mentioned that in the start, one should be all over the place at once. Bunker was quoted as saying you should keep repairing your canvas and one day you'll come in and find it's done. My question is, do you essentially follow the same procedure on the second, third, fourth, etc. sessions, proceeding as with the start, but at each session thereafter simply keep refining key areas, not staying in one area too long until you've accomplished what you were after at the start? So that was one of those really excellent questions, and obviously it's coming up from two different people, one of which worked with me a while back and the other not. The other one I'm sure not, yeah, actually I know I said. Didn't work with me, but this conversation is out there in any number of various ways. And what's interesting, what I found is that in the Gamble conversation, it was there. But in the way we acted, it actually wasn't. In other words, we might work on an area of something, but we weren't doing it because of the unity of the whole anywhere near as much as you do if you're actually operating as a Boston School painter. What I mean to say by that, I remember that one of the first times I painted an area 5 times, completely 5 different times. I painted an object 5 different times. And that there was never any discussion, any contradiction by the teacher, by Gamble. He didn't say, don't be doing that. He didn't say, stay out of that, stay in the visual order, stay all over the place at once. And I think probably largely because that model was actually his basic model. The imaginative painter is painting things and stuff. I mean, he literally is doing drawings of things and stuff. And he does things, strategies and devices to get unity, sort of a visual unity. Whereas the Impressionist, everything is about the visual unity from the first mark and the relationships of things as they appear. And I say things, not objects. I'm saying things as they appear, meaning colors, light effects, edges, as they appear in a relationship and in a continuity, a visual continuity. So obviously, for an Impressionist, the world is sitting before him, and it changes the way you work. And the Impressionists, and before the Impressionists, the Dutch, John Kijn, the Boudins, Denat, all these other kinds of guys, when you have a model sitting before you, your way of working is going to be, I'm saying when you have models, I mean when you have the ensemble sitting before you, your way of working is going to be a little bit different. And because it's more efficient and more comprehensive. So that's the background. So what they're asking, so they're aware that in the start you're all over the place at once. And I brought this one, again, I brought this, I was showing it to you some other time in another video. And in that video, I was making it clear to you that there are different ways of working. I'm hoping I can clarify this here now. But in a painting like this, you're going to take some time to set up effects in their order before you draw objects. And I'm going to have that discussion because somebody else asked me, don't you have to draw, if you're doing figures, don't you have to draw the figure? And of course, this figure wasn't drawn. I don't think it was drawn by Sargent, and it certainly wasn't drawn by me. Now, there are times that you can see Sargent throwing around what appear to be sort of very preliminary outline marks. But what you see that's really profoundly expressed and very strong in this particular thing is that light effect, shall we say, right here. And he would have been after that light effect and maybe some other points to help him establish the low portion of a very long abstraction, right? And he would have been up here establishing this light effect, perhaps, right here. And he would have been over here to establish something related to this thing here, and the beginning of, or this might have even been to be the beginning of his width anchoring. But he's doing it with the look of these effects at these points. So the question that we're being asked is, do we continue doing that? Do we just work with the effects, or at some point do we just paint a head? And I've tried it both ways. You wind up with a very ambivalent picture. You wind up with a picture that looks weird, and it actually was one of those things that clarified to me that you can't be both these guys. You can't be a Boston School impressionist and a Gamble type object painter. An academic or a person working from drawings and still have the same effects. So same games, but I'm not sure I can make this clear to you even if I bring it closer. I'm not sure I can make this clear. But in the subplot, right, there are things like this effect right here, and this effect right here, and minor things just all through the picture. Things happen inside here, but you can see they're minor. Now, why do I say minor? Well, in our world, they're minor because they're in low contrast. Remember, you paint as if you're coming out of a fog, which we are going to talk about. I just love this last series of questions. It's really good stuff. And in the case of that one, it's coming from someone who's got an entirely other background, so it's really good. It's going to be really good information for that person. But in any case, and excuse my eyes, but I got to dig in here. But you see, there are places where there's a part of a basket. There it is, part of a hand, and so if you look at these kinds of things, people talking about this, including Gamble, would say that's sketch or sketchy. But the difference between sketch and sketchy is the very preciseness of the articulation at the key effect. The articulation is precise. It's precise in edge. It's precise in contrast. It's precise in color relation. And it's precise in location, or it's moved quickly until it is. Every once in a while, of course, you'll have to move something again, and you're not resentful of that. That's actually our strategy. Put up stuff and move it. Much like, as I've said before, the writing model is write and rewrite, right? But in this case here, when you get to the subplot here, you get into things like this. Do you now paint the basket? And you can see how you mustn't, right? Because otherwise this thing loses its visual continuity. You have to paint the next things in the order of effects. And it may seem like a very awkward thing, but it's so ridiculously simplistic. And it's so totally unified to the only thing we really work with, which is color, value, and edge, right? So we paint with value units. You can plainly see that these things aren't turned into objects. They are effectually objects, but they're not turned into objects by some careful then going in there and doing the shadow line and doing this line and doing the reflected lights and all that sort of thing in a monotonous little way. The nice thing about this way of working is that it doesn't require you to do little things, because the major things really carry the entire picture. I love that comment that C.S. Lewis said. He said, "I learned to write when I learned to suggest." Well, this is very, very precise. And a person who's suggesting something in writing has to have been very precise about what he said, that then suggests this whole field of other things. And that's what we're seeing here. So at any point you go into the next level, and you have in that area, no matter where you are, you have the most significant aspect of that level. And we travel, therefore, from these strong players out here to the second levels of players around here, just because it's safe and convenient, as a matter of fact. And you find ways to make sure it stays safe. But even to the degree of actually painting clouds like this. You see, there are key clouds, right? That was certainly a key one from the point of view of effect off of that shoulder, one of the most beautiful effects, and especially as it associates with that sunny thing there. By the way, do you see how clear it is in this picture, that the brilliance of this? And I hope you can close your picture up closer, because I could bring this closer, but I'd be completely out of focus, and so would the picture. But you can see how this area is just magnificent in color, chroma, value, edge relations. It's just a masterful thing. And by the way, I'm just copying what I perceive him to be doing. You can rather grasp this stuff also by sort of looking at pictures and seeing what a guy didn't do. You can tell when a guy just ran from the top to the bottom, monotonously. Even guys who do that, if they know their stuff, know how to leave out lots of Mickey Mouse stuff. I mean, the minor players. And, like the great forms are far more important than the subplot, little bumps on the skin, as we refer to them, all the moles, all the warts. Some people would just model their way down, including all the warts. So, but you look up here, though, and this effect here in this cloud would be maybe the leading effect in the sky, apart from, what's happening here. And so this becomes a placeholder. It becomes an angle thing. It becomes a width to the total height. All these things are aspects of this. By the way, when you're painting clouds out there, that's not going to last as a width or anything else. It's just going to be there as an effect for you. It's going to be up to you to leave it where you want it, what's useful for you in terms of the total composition. But that's another story for another time. But the answer, though, that I'm giving is, I hope it's understandable to you both, and I want you to definitely come back if you want me to be more precise about that, or more specific in some particular aspect of it. But I just want to make sure I covered this again, like I do from time to time. Can you speak to we're all over the place at once versus working section by section, area by area. So you're always all over the place at once. And the reason for that is because the thing is a grand ensemble. You're trying to get the totality on the canvas as soon as you can. By the time you've filled the page, and by the way, I leave big gaps of white for some long time, but by the end of the day, I have it all filled in. You're watching the whole and making sure whatever you have out there is presenting as a whole. So you have this rich orangey goldy thing. You have to have the players that are orangey goldy that sort of go to it, or that set of neutral browny things in the play that they make if they're out there. By the way, the one thing I don't compromise on at all in the lay-in is color. Now, when I say compromise, I still am doing just I'm doing maybe working with spots, but I'm actually looking at this unit and any great movements through it, much more than I'm looking at this spot and counting a zillion little spots. And by the way, even Monet, though he was counting spots, was always aware of this. Not this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and hopefully when he got to the end, he was good. He was always aware of this and how it was playing to that or this or whatever the great ways we're talking about. But if you're watching the grand ensemble, what will happen to you is you'll be forced into this area by sheer busyness. The picture, if it's not done, is going to look funny. It'll look like some stand-in for, this is how we work. We don't do this area. Well, by the time you get to the end of the day on a start, this area, being maybe the busiest area, has to be the busiest area. If you're actually able to get there by the end of the day, which I would believe you would if you're not doing minor players, which is a big deal in terms of our efficiencies, right? You cannot do minor players and have a good start by the end of the day. You have to be, that's why you have to blur your eye, because you've got to see the great unities and how things hang together, and only spend time drawing, which is where you lose time. There's a lot of calculation, a lot of math, so to speak, if you want to call it that, a lot of measurement in the drawing, placing of points. There's a lot of measurement too, but it's not spatial in the placement of chromas, getting this color and chroma right to that one and this one or whatever, So keeping that in mind, let me just make sure I haven't, so area by area, yeah, you don't think of finishing this area. You think of doing whatever you have to get this area to be right in the amount of development it has compared to this area, and this area all the time watching how the whole is staying together. And that's the Baron-Grow rule. Hang tight with that one, okay? If you drop dead, the picture wants to have unity so your family can sell it, okay? So it really is a brilliant, this is a guy who wasn't even a little an impressionist, right? Baron-Grow was a sort of a standard painter of the day in that period around, I think he was a student of David, much like Ang. So you know where he was coming from. But that conversation, I tell you, so many of these are far better. They serve us better as impressionist ideas. Maintain the unity of the effect from the beginning to the end. At the beginning, obviously, when you're just spotting colors around, there's going to be a moment when it isn't all hanging together because I haven't a drawing on there yet. You see what I'm saying? But obviously, there's that moment when there's a lot of white and stuff, and you're searching out and putting down things. You put down colors, and you look around, and you put down more and more till you begin to see the unity of the color. Then you begin to put down effects till you begin to see that they're setting right, they're holding their place on the page right, that they're right as effects to each other, and that they're placed well. And then that begins to be a spatial problem. You begin to have the drawing aspect of this thing in hand. And then before you know, by the time you get to the end, you've addressed everything. Form, all those aspects of values, light effects, edge, all those things are in the categories of those things have been set. The majors, the strong edges and the strong effects and the leading chromas and the color scheme, all those things have been set, right? I'm mixing some things in there, but I think you can get the drift of this. So I think I can leave it at that. Let me just look again, though, just in case. I thought this might be a 10-minute one. It's already up to 15. Yeah, and I think that answers Dan's questions about the hierarchy. And I think this is Kevin. I'm not remembering, but yeah, unity all the way through. So yeah, the answer though is you follow the same procedure all the way through. And what happens? That was his question. Do you follow the same procedure? And the answer is, as we set up out here, when you go to an area like this, you do have to set up the leading edge of that effect right there. That's one of your leading edges, maybe to this. And these things are all trying to get right, first of all, to all the majors out here, and then show their leadership in here, and then you begin to set up this area. Now, that's maybe what Dan was referring to. You're setting up this area, but you're doing this actually because this is a busy area, and busy areas have to be dealt with. So yes, you could argue that you can walk over here for a little bit, but you don't do it in a different way. And so you'll put time into this for sure. In fact, once you've got the majors going, the canvas is getting covered, that is your next activity, to get right to that thing you think is the center of interest. It could be that, by the way, and by the way, in this picture, it could be this. I suspect that it's this, not that I know for sure, depending how, I'm not looking at it with you, but it's one of those things to keep in mind, do we know? So I hope you can see that. I hope I didn't set this in such a way you weren't even able to follow me. Anyway, thank you very much, Dan, and I think Kevin, and forgive me if it's somebody else, but your name will show up on the screen if I can ever figure out who asked that. Anyway, see you next time. Be sure to subscribe, share, and blow the minds of your friends with silly stuff like this, because everybody knows it's really about outlines. Modeling is what happens between the contours, right? All right, take care. Yeah. See you next time.